You may have seen the PragerU video on slavery narrated by Candace Owens. Since I'm going to be covering some of the material that came up in future videos, I'm not going to go into lengthy explanations here. I did want to respond to it because I felt the information was presented in a way that is misleading. I'm going to play snippets of what she said and then my brief responses. So let's get right into it.
Here's the first thing you need to know. Slavery was not invented by white people.
You would think this would be common knowledge since even the Bible talks about slavery. There is a reason for this pervasive misconception, though. To justify the capture of non-combatants, known as man-stealing in colonial times, slaveholders sought to associate slavery with blackness. There was a concerted effort to use twisted science, erasure of black history, and media propaganda to project race-based slavery back into ancient times to justify and legitimize chattel slavery here. It's no wonder that even today, most people in the U.S. believe that Europeans have always been the slavers and slaves have been historically black.
Here's the second thing you need to know. White people were the first to formally put an end to slavery. In 1833, Britain was the first country in the history of the world to pass a Slavery Abolition Act. They were quickly followed by France, who in 1848 abolished slavery in her many colonies. Then, of course, came the 13th Amendment in the United States Constitution. After centuries of human slavery, white men led the world in putting an end to the abhorrent practice.
Britain did pass a Slavery Abolition Act in 1833. They were preceded by Mexico's abolition in 1829, which, by the way, was the main reason that Texas, then a part of Mexico, declared itself a republic. However, all that was after Haiti achieved the first successful slave revolt in history and instituted a constitution formally abolishing slavery in 1804. A Haitian statesman was the first to declare slavery a, quote, crime against humanity. It was Haiti's actions that sent a firestorm of controversy throughout North and South America, Europe, and the Caribbean, and made chattel slavery indefensible, especially when held up next to the ideals of the Enlightenment.
Today, we are never told to consider the murderous Persian Empire or the cannibalism of indigenous tribes of North and South America or the heinous actions under the imperialistic Muslim, Chinese, Mongol, or Japanese empires, to name just a few.
It is certainly true that there has been no shortage of duplicity and cruelty among humans, but the heinous acts of the Persian, Ottoman, or Chinese empires never impacted the United States, like its own contradictory touting of equality and freedom while maintaining and expanding a system of heritable chattel slavery. That system has had major repercussions on our American institutions, culture, and on American people up till now.
That Africans were sold into slavery by other black Africans.
I've heard this phrase as, quote, Africans sold their own people. Just as wars between England, France, and Spain and other European countries would not be characterized as European wars against their own people, the fact is that African nations would have had no concept of their blackness or Africanness as a unifying force before the theories which were developed to support chattel slavery and colonization of black Africans were developed.
The stark reality is that our lives had very little value to our ancestors.
Let's be clear. African slavers didn't sell their families. They sold enemy captives and captured foreigners. There is no credible evidence I've seen that any African tribe did not value their families or their tribesmen. And common sense tells us our ancestors did everything they could to survive and give us the chance to be.
Here's the third thing you need to know. If you think slavery is a relic of the past, you're wrong. There are some 700,000 slaves in Africa today, right now. That's the lowest estimate that I could find. Other sources say there are many more. For context, that's almost twice as many slaves as were ever brought to the United States. Child soldiers, human trafficking, forced labor, these are the conditions that currently exist within the same sub-Saharan region where the transatlantic slave trade originated. African bodies are being sold today like they were sold then, and no, they are not being purchased by any country of white men. In fact, slavery, by any traditional definition, is exclusively practiced today within non-white countries.
According to Walk Free, an international human rights group, modern slavery is being practiced in every country in the world, including the U.S. If the signs at every airport or transportation hub is any indication, human trafficking is prevalent here. Also, according to Walk Free, in 2023, Africa had the second lowest prevalence of modern slavery, behind the Arab states, Europe and Central Asia, and Asia and the Pacific. Only the Americas had a lower rate. I'm not sure where her statistics are coming from.
Black victimhood is nothing if not profitable. It elects politicians and funds racial grievance groups. And if Black Americans began to view themselves as partners in the American dream, if we embraced the patriotic spirit that holds all men are created equal, the patriotic spirit that is our real heritage, then the race hustlers would soon be out of business.
Black Americans have embraced the principles set forth in the Declaration of Independence since colonial times, when those ideas were swirling around the Atlantic. The black sailors who helped ferry Washington across the Delaware didn't do it for money. Neither did the ones who helped him retreat from Brooklyn Heights in 1776. The newly freed communities during the Reconstruction instituted each one teach one and began such a meteoric rise in their pursuit of the American dream that our own country sanctioned the rise of white supremacy terror organizations to, quote, put us in our place. And how would the, quote, race hustlers be put out of business? Do black activists actually cause and promote the problems they are attempting to stop? Would the four enslaved men who put a petition for their community before the Massachusetts representatives in 1773 asking for their freedom and freedom dues of 1 day's payment for every 7 days' work to, quote, set up elsewhere as free men be classified as race hustlers? Did black activists somehow institute Jim Crow, a system by which African Americans were denied access to the American dream through threats, violence, and unequal treatment? To call people who speak against injustices race hustlers is a pretty big stretch. But I expect this kind of misleading narrative from an organization that calls itself PragerU, intentionally giving listeners the impression that it's an educational university and not a right-wing think tank. As I stated in my intro video, real education is important if we don't want to fall for the same propaganda denying our place in American history. Throughout our American Odyssey, many of us have had a clear vision of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness even during chattel slavery. My next two videos will be about the colonial and revolutionary periods. Please like this video and subscribe to be notified when my new videos are up. Until then, eyes on the prize, folks.